Well, I did not see this coming. Hello, my gaming brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am Jonathan, your host here at QuickBird Gaming, and I appreciate you tuning in for another weekly news wrap up where we cover all the gaming news from the past week fit to cover. We're covering the week of 16 to 22 November, and as usual, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. We've got to talk about Ubisoft trying to spin their situation. We've got Bethesda who just can't leave well enough alone with Fallout 4. They're going out to patch it again, and the Roblox CEO giving the most astoundingly baffling podcast interview I have ever heard in my life. This is really bizarre. As always, if you're interested in a particular story, look down in the description below and you can use a timestamp to jump to a story that really interests you. Before we get to all that, though, we got to talk about the cover story, and that is how Black Ops 7 is doing. And to put it bluntly, it ain't going so well. Okay, we're going to start off with this article from Eurogamer from Monday, the 17th of November. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 underperforms on Steam during launch weekend, but does that mean the game has sold badly? This is always kind of the sticking point with these discussions. If we don't have official sales numbers from the developer or the publisher, it's kind of hard to always qualify how well a game is done, good or bad. However, there are a few indicators we can look to, and this article points out to the first one. It says, okay, that the Steam database listing for Call of Duty Black Ops 7, the game is ranked 6th in global total sellers. However, the game only reached a peak concurrent player count above 100,000. This sounds impressive, but comparing Black Ops 7 to previous releases paints a different picture. In 2024, October of 2024, when Black Ops 6 came out, the game saw a peak of 315,000, so 3 times as much. Earlier still in 2022, when Modern Warfare 3 released, the game saw a Steam peak of almost 500,000. Now, granted, if I remember correctly, Modern Warfare 3 was not a Game Pass day one release, playable on Game Pass on day one. So that's comparing apples and oranges. However, Black Ops 6 last year was. And so you're comparing games that had roughly the same market share, and you see that there were still 3 times as many people playing on Steam as there are Black Ops 7, as there are this year. And that's kind of not a good sign. This is amplified when you go over to this article by the game business. This is from Friday the 21st. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 European launch sales are 63% down over Battlefield 6. Okay, and it also said, based on our estimates, the game is also down by more than 50% over last year's Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And the rest of the article goes into detail about how they got those numbers. If this is correct, yes, I know it is for one market, and it doesn't include, and the article caveats that it doesn't include subscription services, so PlayStation and Xbox. However, they're saying that this game basically sold in terms of physical copies and digital sales through sources they can track, sold half of what Black Ops 6 did. So right then and there, and it sold a third basically of what Battlefield 6 sold. These are concerning numbers, and it's kind of where you start to say once is just an event, twice is starting to get into a trend. This is, I think, it's not just the fact that we've got relatively lower sales from the data we have. We can go to the Metacritic reviews, and here's Black Ops 6. Released October of last year, so it's about a year old. And you can see it's got a decent critic score, pretty middling player score, but okay, it's fine. Now let's go to Black Ops 7 Metacritic. Slightly lower critic score, but the player score tanked. People are not responding well to this game, not as well as they did to the last game in the series. And you can certainly see this when you go over to the Steam score. Yeah, it's mostly negative if you can't read that. 38% of user reviews are positive. 38% of 1,800 reviews are positive. And when you roll down and look at the actual reviews, it's a sea of red. All kinds of things. They're criticizing skill-based matchmaking being a factor, the lackluster campaign. They are criticizing the fact that the game is not innovating, and on and on and on. And it's funny too, when you get down to even positive reviews, they say, I only recommend this because you have to see how stupid the campaign is. Campaign is trash, multiplayer is trash. Zombies, I can vouch for that setting. So even the positive reviews are not painting a great picture of this. And I think that there's, aside from the fact that Black Ops 7, from what I'm reading, is not innovating and has all these problems. Players this year have a lot of other options. Battlefield 6 is doing very well. Arc Raiders is still hitting 400,000 players daily. There are, for people that want to play team-based shooter-type games, there are a lot of options right now. And I think that Black Ops has, Call of Duty has rested on their laurels too long, and now they're finally being called for it. Do I think the game's a failure? I mean, I still think it's going to sell millions of copies just because it has a built-in fan base and people are going to play it. Will it be financially successful? That I don't know, because we have no idea what the development tail on this was. I've seen people speculate it could be $1 billion. And if that's the case, it may not be financial. It may be a financial money loser before it's over. I don't know. It's just hard to say. But I think in terms of player fatigue, it's definitely starting to show some cracks now. And I think they know this too. I'll cite one last example. This article from Insider Gaming from Wednesday the 19th. Black Ops 7 campaign in-game will be unlocked for all players Friday, starting this Friday, so yesterday, as of the time this video is made. The in-game mode will be unlocked for everyone, regardless of campaign completion or not. Anyone who had already beat the story will get some rewards. Earlier this month, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 had quite the rough patch. AI allegations, I didn't even talk about that. There's all this been discussion about the AI scraping to come up with their artwork. And that's been another negative that's just hit them. Let's see. In multiplayer modes, especially in-game, have received well. It did require one to go through a garbage campaign, so many haven't even got to try it yet. Not even a month since releasing, the mode will be available to all. They're unlocking the in-game content regardless of whether people have done the campaign or not. To me, that's a tacit admission that their campaign is garbage. People are not thrilled with it. And the fact that it's not necessary for what people really want the game for. They tacked on the campaign mode. It was not well received. People didn't like the fact you had to be online for it. You can't pause during it for what is supposed to be a single player experience in this game. They're just making a ton of missteps. And I think it's finally showing now. I think it's finally showing this time around with the player counts. I mean, yeah, they're going to end up, forget what I said a minute ago. By the time they get all their microtransaction cosmetic purchases, it will probably end up being a money maker. But I have to wonder how much longer they're going to keep going down this path, because it feels like to me that every iteration of this is getting less and less successful, and it will get to a point where it won't be a money maker anymore. Players just have too many other options right now. So, I mean, let me know down in the comments if you think I'm wrong about that. But anyway, Black Ops 7 has had kind of a rough ride. It's really irrelevant to me outside of the fact that I find it interesting as a game news issue, because I don't play these types of games, but I know a ton of people do. And I really just want people to have good games. And it feels like from the feedback I'm seeing, most people don't think that this is a good game for them, just in general. So I guess we'll see where we go from here. Okay, now we have to talk about Ubisoft and what is going on there. You may remember that last week, in the last news video, I covered that Ubisoft had delayed their earnings call and asked for trading to halt, and everybody kind of held their breath going, is Ubisoft in trouble? Well, I think the answer is actually yes and no, as we'll get into it with this Games Rant article that was published on Friday the 21st of November. I really hate these frickin' banners that they put up on these websites that you can't undo. Ashes of Creation was an MMO that probably would have looked good in 2012. It's been in development since 2017, 8 years, and they're putting it as a pre-built alpha out on Steam now, and they want you to pay $50 for that early access for it. You can miss me with that crap. You know where your $50 is going. Clearly, it's going to making intrusive banners and not covering the games and not improving the game. Anyway, all right, I'll stop with that. Okay, Ubisoft comments on AI, Assassin's Creed sales, and more. Okay, they did have their annuals earning call, blah, 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 blah. It was the wait up to Ubisoft's earning call was filled with drama, as last week the company canceled mere minutes before it was to take place. Okay, Ubisoft's reasoning for pushing the earnings call back by 6 days was simply because the company hired new auditors over the summer. Okay, and then they come down here and they say, according to Yves Guillemot, the CEO, Assassin's Creed Shadow has been a hit for the company. While actual sales numbers weren't revealed, said the entire franchise was overperforming. Unfortunately, there was no official word on Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake. Okay, and then it comes to Rainbow Six. They say they saw a huge player spike, etc. Ubisoft and Tencent's new partnership is reportedly off to a good start. Vantage Studios was officially announced in August. The new subsidiary will oversee IPs like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. An earnings call also revealed that Tencent's investment deal in Vantage Studios is about to close. Tencent is expected to invest $1.25 billion into the new studio. This partnership between the companies is set to influence the future of some of Ubisoft's most prized franchises. And it kind of goes on into that business. Look, I have to, I'm gonna tread a real fine line here between what I know and what I suspect. Everywhere in the games media, you will see them parroting what Ubisoft said, that this was a success, that this was just a clerical error. This is why this year was a success. I mean, this was just a clerical error. That's why they delayed the earning calls, etc., etc. However, if you dig into things, I couldn't find it. I looked for it. I couldn't find the statement where they said that they had to make a payment of $250 billion to secure a loan. I'm sorry, $250 million to take care of a loan that was outstanding. They were actually talking about avoiding a loan defaulting. And if you know anything about a loan defaulting, for corporate interest, that's where they start having to get into selling off assets to repay a loan. Editor Jonathan coming in after the fact here. I did find this Bloomberg article over on MSN that talked a bit, it paints a little bit less of a rosy picture than what the games media is portraying for this. It talks about how basically that Ubisoft delayed their earnings call and tried to slow their stock or to halt their stock trading because there was concern that the Tencent deal had fallen through. They essentially had to secure the money from Tencent to avoid this loan default. That's basically what it came down to. So I will link this article down below if you want to read further on it. And like I said, this is kind of a very factual money discussion about the state of the company. It doesn't really talk about the games, just where they are monetarily. Anyway, back to the video. They can say that the franchise Assassin's Creed is overperforming and that AC Shadows was a hit without giving solid numbers. That doesn't mean anything. That's corporate gobbledygook speak. See, this is you always got to read between the lines of what's being said, not just in the games industry, but with all media. You always got to read between the lines of what's being said and look at what they're really saying. They didn't give us any specifics about how well the game sold. They just said it's overperforming. Against what metric? Who determines that it's overperforming? That's really a bunch of crap in my mind. You don't suddenly take your 3 most profitable IPs and toss them into a subsidiary that's partly owned by another mega corporation that's going to wield considerable influence over your direction of your intellectual properties because you're making so much money and succeeding so well. You can look at these facts and you could deduce that essentially they were about to default. They held off on the earnings call because of this upcoming default to secure the money from Tencent to pay it off and basically avoid having asset forfeiture or bankruptcy. Now, you could say, well, that's not what they said. They didn't admit to that. I said, no, they didn't. But would they? Why would they? That theory fits the facts just as well as what they're presenting here. And I've just come to believe that you don't get the right answer from these companies, and the media is not going to dig into it hard either. Like I said, I don't know what the ground truth is here, but this whole thing kind of stinks. I'm going to scroll back down here to the next part. According to Yves Guillemot, Ubisoft is all in on generative AI and game development. Well, of course he is. Let's do the least amount of work and see if we can make the most amount of money. And they said, okay, we're making great strides in applying generative AI to use high-value use cases that bring tangible benefits to our players and teams. They don't give a shit about their players. They are trying to cut money. And here's another thing, too. Again, I wish I could have found the article where they said that they had made something, their revenues were something like $50 billion or $50 million over last year's. However, they also cut something like 1,800 people. And if you go out and you figure that that was about $50,000 a person, well, they saved $70 million right there. They didn't make any more money off their games. They cut things. They cut people out of their company. They went into debt. They borrowed more money. They had Tencent to bail them out. Again, you could say, well, there's no basis for that. I said, well, again, my theory fits the facts just as well as the story they're trying to sell. Time will prove who's right here. So anyway, they're all in on AI. And then it says Ubisoft has 4 games planned for the first quarter of 2026. Mobile game, Division Resurgence, a remake, and an unannounced game. Now everybody's wetting their pants and thinks this is going to be the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake. I don't know enough about the Assassin's Creed games to say did it really needed a remake. Maybe it did. I've read some people saying the original never really ran well on PC, and that alone, if they retune it back up, that would make it worthwhile. That's if you trust them not to screw it up. And I will turn to this IGN article for more. This was published on Monday the 17th. Assassin's Creed publisher Ubisoft says many new games are struggling as players turn away from traditional releases in favor of subscription, live service, and free-to-play games. Ubisoft has warned of falling company revenues and said that it's seen many new games are struggling to stand out as players turn away from traditional full-price releases. Projects that would previously stood out are now finding it tough to achieve the sales they once may have had. They wrote in a UK financial filing, which blames a wider change in taste among the players, explaining that the traditional full game model of a single $65 to $85 game to consumer as a one-time purchase was becoming less ubiquitous as players are looking for subscription services, long-running games as a service, free-to-play games, and cloud streaming. This message is 100% at odds with their financial earnings where they just said, oh, but we're doing great. Assassin's Creed is doing great. Our single-player games are doing great. But don't look too close because over here we said that the single-player games are the way of the past. I would caveat this. I would put two qualifiers on this. One, I will agree with them in part by saying that crappy single-player games are not going to go anywhere. The slop that AAA games are continuing to pump out, as the kind of games like Assassin's Creed Shadow, which may have been a success, but it wasn't a huge success. It wasn't enough to stop them from bleeding off their IPs. Those type of games are not going to be embraced by the player anymore. They're just not going to accept it. But it's saying that single-player games are an utter failure. I mean, just this calendar year alone, you've had games like Expedition 33, which sold 5 million copies, and Arc Raiders over 4 million copies. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was over 2 million. Split Fiction sold over 4 million. You could say, well, those were all AA titles. Okay, fine. Monster Hunter Wild sold 10 million copies. Borderlands 4 was 2.5 to 3 million copies. These are just numbers that we know of. These aren't final numbers. This is just what was published at the time. Silent Hill F sold over 1 million copies, I think, in its first day. Ghost of Yotai, as I reported last week, is over 3 million copies now. These are all single-player, non-live service, non-cloud streaming, games as a service type of crap that the industry wants to push on us, that all sold well. If your game is good, it is going to sell, bottom line. And that didn't even talk about the we could go chapter and verse for the indie games that have all sold over 1 million copies just this year alone. Your games are going to sell. They would say, oh, well, we need to be leaning into the live service space, especially with more AI and stuff. Really? How'd that work out with X Defiant? Didn't last. Shut down. Ubisoft doesn't have a good track record with trying to make these games in the first place because they're no good. And frankly, I feel like the whole live service games as a service space is all but tapped out now. You can't just go in there and rustle up a new player base out of nowhere. You have to basically cannibalize an existing player base. And a lot of players are not going to leave a game unless your game is awesome. Filling it with AI crap and just trying to make a clone of what's been successful is not going to work. So in the end, I really don't know what's going to happen here. All I know is that I don't trust Ubisoft. I don't trust what they're saying. And I think that, again, a company that has to shell out its best-selling properties to stay afloat isn't doing great. And I don't think any amount of AI in the world is going to save them from their own incompetence. Okay, I got to get away from Ubisoft because they're just going to annoy me for the rest of the night otherwise. On the other hand, this subject isn't going to make me feel any better. As I covered in my lead article in last week's gaming news, Fallout 4 had its anniversary edition released from Bethesda, and of course, it screwed up a lot of things. The edition itself was buggy, had all kinds of problems with the Creation Club menu, had DLCs that were registered as not being owned by the player. A very poorly, not well thought out product, poorly released, poorly tested. I mean, they should have caught most of the stuff in testing, but they didn't. Now they're getting ready to roll out an update. It should be this week. I think they said, we come down here. Yeah, they said Bethesda recently mentioned it would be ready by the week of November 24th. So that's the week starting tomorrow as of the posting of this video. So it'll be out soon. And they've got another one scheduled in December to do some more stuff. Now you can look at the patch notes, and basically it's just a bunch of bug fixes and crash fixes. I'm looking at it thinking, there go the mods again. I know I looked at some of the mods after last week's patch. Some of them have already been updated. Others haven't. Who knows how long it'll be till this situation gets stable again. You know, Bethesda didn't touch this game for 9 years. They pretty much left it alone until the release of the TV show last year, and then they've been tinkering with it ever since, and it's just been very unstable. Yeah, last week I said I was probably done with it. That was just frustration talking. I'm sure I'll find my way back to it at some point, but I'm not touching it until they leave it alone again. I would just assume they just left it out there and not screwed with it anymore, then keep trying to mess with it. That's just not Bethesda's way. And this is the company we're expecting to deliver Elder Scrolls 6 and maybe Fallout 5 in the future, and we expect these to be good products. Yeah, my hopes are not high either. Now this I have to file under the too weird for reality category. I'll start off with this Engadget article from Tuesday the 18th. It says Roblox begins asking tens of millions of children to verify their age with a selfie. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Roblox has been in just a heap of shit in the last 6 months or so because of allegations of predators on their platforms. They've had some social media blunders where they actually kicked a guy loose who was helping police literally capture predators on the platform. And they basically gave the appearance that they wanted to shit people. They didn't want to, worry about getting rid of people preying on children. They wanted to just stop talking about it and not let it be seen. And I'm not saying that's the case. It just gave the appearance of doing that. They also are being sued by several states in the union. They're under criminal investigation probe in Florida. And the game has been banned in several countries. They've not had a great year. So now they're trying to begin to do age verification. And they're basically doing it with ID or a face scan. Now, from a dystopian perspective, for a company and a platform that already has problems with allegations of predation against children, asking children to do face scans, to me, seems like a step in a very wrong direction. They're already in hot water over this. And now their solution is to expose children's real identities more directly. And don't give me a single bit of line about how it's going to be a secure system. We already know that is a complete and utter hogwash. Sony's been telling us they have a secure system from hackers for years. And how many times have they been hacked? This is bullshit. This is really bad. And it gets worse. Now, I'll cut over to PC Gamer, who's not necessarily my favorite source because of some of their spins, but in this case, I 100% agree with them. And this came up on Friday on the 21st of November. Interview with Roblox CEO kicks off with an unbelievable answer about its Predator program being not just a problem, but an opportunity. And somehow it gets crazier from there. Now, I will post a link to this article because if you go from this article, you can link directly to the podcast. And I'm not with the New York Times podcast between the interviewer and David Baszucki, the Roblox CEO. I'm not sure if I post the link directly if you'll be able to access it. But anyway, it's about a half hour long, and if you want to listen to some real wazoo shit and just some scratch your head going, WTF, what is this guy thinking? Go check this out. The interview starts off with a real bang. When asked what he thinks of the problem of predators on Roblox, Bazewski replies, "We think of it not necessarily as a problem, but an opportunity as well. How do we allow people to build, communicate, and hang out? How do we build the future of communication at the same time?"
What the fuck are you talking about, man?
This guy is utterly off his rocker. And it gets worse. And as you go read or go listen to the podcast, he comes off as completely unprepared. He totally dismisses any kind of allegations, the characterization that the platform has a problem with people preying on children, which we know that it does. Wow. Just wow. I bring this up just because I saw it mentioned in a few places, and this article was from IGN from the 18th of November. Nier creator Yoko Taro is still working on games. They just keep getting canceled. Yoko Taro, the creator of the Nier and Drakengard games, has been awfully quiet lately. Though he's worked on some smaller projects, the lack of a proper Nier follow-up or other new major game from him has been getting under fans' skin. But according to Taro, he has been working on projects. They just keep getting canceled. This comes from his remarks at Korean gaming convention G-Con 2025. He says, "I often get told stuff like, why aren't you making a new sequel to Nier? Or Yoko Taro isn't doing anything, but that's because recently a lot of projects I was involved in got discontinued midway through development," he said. And I thought it's too bad, I think. I played Nier Automata for the first time in the last couple of years. Was the first time I played it, and I really liked it. I did a full playthrough earlier this year. It is unique. It's memorable. It has one of the best soundtracks to a game I've ever heard. It's got a haunting, memorable story. And I would love to see him get a chance to try and do some more. Just hasn't worked out. I guess when you talk about games that are odd and they're different and studios not wanting to take a chance on them, this is usually the type of stuff we're talking about. And this is why we get, another live service slop game instead. It's unfortunate, but this is the reality we live in. Well, I hope he gets a chance, and I hope he keeps working. Next is this story from Dual Shockers, which came out on Tuesday, the 18th of November. Megabonk pulls out of the Game Awards race. I don't think it qualifies. So the Game Awards dropped on the 17th. By the way, check out my prediction as I covered the nominees. I'll link to it down below if you want to see what I thought games were going to win. I have no idea if I'll be right. Seems like my predictions went against the grain of a lot of popular creators, but we'll just see what happens. Anyway, Megabonk was nominated for Best Debut Indie Game, and the maker said it wasn't the developer's debut. He says the nomination doesn't feel right as it wasn't his first game, and he's requested to draw out. And let's just see where it says. In a post on X, Vedinad said that while it's an honor and a dream to see his project nominated, he doesn't believe the game qualifies for the debut category since he has released other titles in the past. I've made games in the past under different studio names, so Megabonk is not my debut game. So he encourages people to cast their votes for one of the other games in the category. Now, I saw some discussion about this where people said, look, what he's doing is setting the precedent that if a developer works for a studio as part of a team, then strikes out on their own and does their own game, it might not be considered a nomination for a nomination as a debut because they had worked for another studio. Some people took a little issue with that. As far as I'm concerned, the guy had made his decision, and it speaks to a certain level of integrity and humility that's present very little in our society now, let alone in the gaming industry. I think they should honor his wishes, and from what I've seen, the Game Awards did agree to withdraw his nomination. So I haven't played Megabonk yet, but frankly, this makes me move it up the list a little bit. Next is yet another indie success, and I love reporting on these. This article from Insider Gaming from Wednesday the 19th. Dispatch reaches 2 million copies in less than a month. Despite releasing less than a month ago, Ad Hoc's Dispatch has sold 2 million copies. The latest episodes 7 and 8 only came out last week and reached a 1 million copy milestone within 10 days. Dispatch follows Robert, a former superhero working a desk job and dispatching reformed villains in Los Angeles. Composed of former Telltale game members, Ad Hoc Studio brought the iconic choose-your-own-adventure style dialogue, choices, and consequences, and they have now hit 2 million copies. with a very simple gameplay feature that people seem to really like. And it's sitting at it's available on Steam and PS5. It's sitting at overwhelmingly positive on Steam. I recommend you go check it out. They are the Ad Hoc Studios is talking about doing another season of it, so this game may just keep going. I didn't want to report on this, but I felt like I had to. This article comes to us from Games Radar from Friday the 21st. Who bought a $40,000 boat? Where winds meet, fans can only stand agape as one MMO whale drops enough money for a real car on an in-game mount within a week of launch. It may not have been $40,000, but you go down and do the math breakdown depending on how lucky or unlucky this person was in the gotcha system. It could have been half that, or it could have been half again as much. It could have been $60,000, depending. And I'll just say that no matter how bad your gaming life is going, you're not that guy. And don't ever be that guy. All right, gang, I have rambled on way past my bedtime, so I'm going to leave this episode here. I thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate it. If you are enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like on the video. If you have any comments about anything I said tonight, if you want to disagree with me about my rant on Ubisoft, please let me know down below. I read all comments, try to answer as many as possible. I thank you in advance for doing so. Well, that said, like I said, I'm gonna shove off here. I'll be back next week with another episode of QuickBird News. This industry never runs out of things for us to talk about. So thank you once again for tuning in. You all go out there, live your best lives, and y'all stay gaming.